afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to you all. The ceremony will start in just a few moments. The procession is on its way, but before that, I have a few obligatory requests and notices to give out. Please ensure all your mobile phones are on silent, switched to silent mode, or switched off. Photographs will be taken throughout the ceremony, and if anybody who does not consent to their photo being taken today and used for publicity purposes, please do let a marshal know. In the extremely unlikely event that we need to exit the building in a hurry, please remain calm and seated. Marshals will assist you in exiting the building. For staff on stage, we have a fire exit to the left of the altar through the vestry. For people to my right, please exit through the rear tower door. And for people to my left, please exit through the main door through which you came in. Marshals will direct you. When the ceremony has finished, the Vice-Chancellor's procession will leave the church and you will be asked to stand. The procession will be followed by the Graduands and finally our VIPs. Our remaining guests will then be asked to follow. Finally, to the Graduands, may I be the first to congratulate you on your achievement. When your name is called, please step onto the stage. If you are happy to shake the Vice-Chancellor's hand, please continue straight to the centre stage when your name is called. If you would prefer not to shake the Vice-Chancellor's hand, please bow your head upon stepping onto the stage before continuing to centre stage. Please look to the camera to my left for your official photos with the Vice-Chancellor. When you leave the stage, please return to your seat by walking through the centre of the church, round the back and then back down the aisle here. Thank you. Please enjoy the ceremony and the rest of the day. Can I now ask you please to stand for the procession?
Please be seated. The Vice-Chancellor will now open the ceremony for the conferment of degrees and diplomas.
Esteemed colleagues from the Faculty of Education, Registrar, ladies and gentlemen, and graduands of the University of Buckingham. It's a great pleasure for me to open the service today, the ceremony today, and to welcome you on behalf of the University of Buckingham to the ceremony for the conferment of degrees and other awards. It's so good to see so many of you here in person. We've been starved, haven't we, of personal contact, and we're now having graduation ceremonies in person, and it's thrilling to see so many of you here today and your families and friends gathered here too. It's a somewhat miserable November day, but I think the warmth of the ceremony here today will cheer us up and bring us out of the gloom that's outside. This year is in fact the 20th anniversary of what is now the Faculty of Education. It was created 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, there was a famous man. Some of the older people like myself will remember Christopher Woodhead. Sir Christopher Woodhead as he became. And he was Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Schools. And he was very dissatisfied with the way teacher training was not working, he felt, to turn out the best teachers in our schools. And in fact, he came up with a figure, Barnaby will have the exact number, but it was something like 46,000 teachers were not good enough. And so with Professor Anthony O'Hare, who was a very famous professor of philosophy and philosophy of education, he came to the Vice-Chancellor, the then Vice-Chancellor here at the University of Buckingham, and asked if he could create a new style Faculty of Education which would educate teachers in the way that he felt would bring better education to schools. And hence the University of Buckingham School of Education, now Faculty of Education, was created. And I go back a long way with this school as well. I've been Vice-Chancellor for 1 year, but I actually was the very first external examiner for the School of Education here some 20 years ago. It's wonderful, this year we've moved you from Whittlebury Hall, which was a hotel some 10 miles away, and I'm really encouraged that I've managed to move you all to this campus. So many of you don't know the campus, so please make sure as you go, we walk down to the Balloff lawn later on, do have a look at the campus. Even on a gloomy day like today, it's still very enticing. We're actually in this wonderful fold of the River Great Ouse. On 3 sides, the campus is surrounded by the River Great Ouse, and that was in fact the site of the original Saxon settlement, 6th, 7th century Saxon settlement. The university covers that site, and then up here there's a small hill where the Saxon fort was, so the protection for the 4th side. And then later on, this site became the Norman Castle. So if any of you were confused, you came to the church, it was called Castle Street. That's why, and then the castle was then superseded by this magnificent Grade 1 listed church building. So it's wonderful you're here today. The university was opened at this very spot on the 6th of February 1976 by one Margaret Thatcher, standing here. And you know, I said about the School of Education being set up in order to be somewhat iconoclastic, if you like, somehow breaking the mold. So the University of Buckingham itself was set up in order to break the mold of universities at the time. And Margaret Thatcher came here. She was then leader of the opposition in 1976. Obviously, she went on to become Prime Minister and then our Chancellor, the figurehead of the university in the 1990s. But she gave a speech here, which I think, I'm just going to quote a few lines from her. I think it's still relevant to us today. She said, independence, because we were proudly independent. We were the independent university that was set up and still is the premier independent university in this country. She said, independence, we must remember, is not a gift. It is not something that governments confer, but something that a free people enjoys and uses. Her words, I think, resonate with us today. And she continued, freedom requires vigor and imagination in using the opportunities available. But unless we are worthy and able to take advantage of a freedom not yet extinguished in our land, we shall become pale shadows, like civilizations before us who are eventually thrust aside and dispossessed by more rigorous rivals. She said those words here, and I think they're very powerful for us today as we think about ourselves as the independent university and the School of Education created, again, to stir up the teacher training in this land. This graduation service is about education. And that's particularly gratifying for me because my academic discipline was education before I became Vice-Chancellor. In fact, like many of you, I know there's a mixture of PGCE and Masters and other students here. After I'd trained as a teacher, I went to become a mathematics teacher in Zimbabwe. In the early days of independence in a different sense there of the country of Zimbabwe. And I talked to colleagues and they felt maybe as you're embarking on this journey as education graduands moving forward, it might be worth just saying a few little things about my own career path. I started as a mathematics teacher and then I came back to this country, to England, to work in mathematics education research, and then did my PhD at UCL Institute of Education and became an expert on independent education, private education. And because of my links with Zimbabwe earlier, I'd managed to get some work for the International Finance Corporation, the private arm of the World Bank. I got some work studying private independent education across the developing world. And I was working in Argentina, Peru, Brazil, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and India. And I was in India 21 years ago when my life changed. Because I was an expert on private education, but for whatever reason, I felt my life should be about serving the poor, the less blessed, as people called them in India. And yet I was an expert on private education. Private education was about the elite, and I was there on a consultancy contract for the International Finance Corporation, feeling dissatisfied with my life, and I went into the slums of the old city of Hyderabad, where I was based there. And my life changed. And I went in there and I found a school. It turned out to be a private school, what we call now low-cost private school. And then I found another one, and then another, and soon I was in contact with a federation of 500 of these low-cost private schools set up by entrepreneurs in the slums, in the poor areas, serving poor families, charging small fees that totally sustained the schools. And for me, the confusion was, well, why are poor parents sending their children to private schools when they have to pay, when the government schools are free? And I would ask poor parents, they were mostly Muslim mothers I met, I'd say, well, why are you sending your child to a private school? The government school's free. Why are you doing this? And they said time and time again, using similar words, in the government schools, our children are abandoned. So I wanted to see for myself what was actually going on. So I left these private schools in the slums I went with a district education officer to look at one of these government schools. And it was a nice building. But sure enough, I went into the very first classroom and it was almost like a sea of faces like you, except they were children, they were poor children, 130 in the class, eager to learn, excited to see a visitor interested in them. But no teaching. No teaching was going on. The teachers had abandoned the children. And I saw that time and time again. So I went back to Washington, D.C. for the International Finance Corporation headquarters, really excited about what I'd seen. I said, did you know that the poor are using these private schools in the slums, in the poor areas? And they said, calm down, Thule. All you've seen are a few businessmen exploiting the poor. And I didn't think that's what I'd seen at all. So I managed to get a grant from the John Templeton Foundation to see if this phenomenon was there in other parts of the world. And I went to Nigeria, to particularly a shanty town called Makoko, which is built on stilts into the dark waters of the Lagos Lagoon. I went to fishing villages in Ghana, in central region. I went to the slums of Nairobi in Kenya. Some of the slums have been made famous by various aid programs, Kibera and other ones there. I went to rural China, to the foothills of the Himalayas, and always found the same phenomenon of these low-cost private schools serving the poor. And I spent the rest of my career exploring this phenomenon, living and working where I could in the poorest parts. And actually, for whatever reason, I felt I wanted to extend the work to the most difficult places in the world. So I then started working in Liberia, Sierra Leone, South Sudan, Somalia, and Somaliland, and in Central America, in Honduras. And I could regale you with stories about the work I've been doing in these places, but I don't want to stretch your indulgence too far. But needless to say, it's been an immensely satisfying career. 2 years ago, I landed in Buckingham, expecting to carry on, and then this position of Vice-Chancellor came up, and I've not been anywhere for 2 years now. Someone reviewed one of my books and said, Julie is suffering from a severe dose of wanderlust. But I just wanted to say these words because we don't know where your careers are we don't know where it's all going to take us. That work is carrying on. I've got a centre at the university in the Vincent building where we'll be going afterwards for photographs. So the work is continuing. And I did open a semi-low-cost private school in the north-east of England, in Durham. Very interested in doing the same down south, if any of you should be interested in talking to me about this. The point I'm trying to make is we don't know where when I was in a similar position to you, I didn't know my life's work was going to take me to Somaliland and South Sudan, to the poorest slums of the world, where life is very different from what you think it might be. But you're going to do wonderful things. This is what's so exciting about being here amongst education graduands. I give talks to those studying law and medicine and whatever, and I feel, obviously excited by the graduands here, but really I identify with you so much, and I know you're going to do excellent things, whatever you choose to do and whatever you want to do. I'm happy you're here. I'm thinking of where you're going in the future. And I want to close my remarks with a few words about today. Today in history. I always do this, and it's a thing I have. If we have a momentous occasion, and the 6th of November 2021 is a momentous occasion for you. It's a wonderful occasion that we can celebrate together. So what happened in the 6th of November, going back? And 6th of November 1913, something special happened. Mahatma Gandhi, of course, led the resistance movement, the non-violent resistant movements against the British in India. But before he went there, he was in South Africa, leading some resistance movements there against, it was pre-apartheid, but the regime there. And on the 6th of November 1913, he was arrested for leading the Indian Miners' March there. And I want to finish with a few quotes from Mahatma Gandhi, because I think he was a brilliant educationalist. He created the first school he had in Tolstoy Farm there in South Africa. And he wrote books on education and themes of education. He was very much into education of the whole person for change. But one of the quotes, we mustn't take it the wrong way, but we are always very concerned about lifelong learning, aren't we, as educators and teachers? And he had some words to say about that. He said, "Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever." And I think, well, die tomorrow, we're not going to die tomorrow, but the carpe diem, seize the day, seize the moment. That's really wonderful. That's a really wonderful sentiment for us all to have. Don't sort of put things off till tomorrow that you can do today. Seize the moment, but learn as if you're going to live forever and continue learning. Many of you will go on to do masters or PhDs in education or cognate disciplines, and you will carry on learning. But in your jobs as teachers, you will carry on learning, and that's wonderful to remember. So that's one of his quotes, but he was, of course, wanting to change the world, and I know many of us in education want to change the world in whatever ways we can. I certainly do. I'm an idealist, and I was an idealist when I was your age and going out into the world. I'm an idealist now that I'm an older man, and when I'm a much older man, I would want to still be an idealist and embracing change. But Mahatma Gandhi said this: be the change that you wish to see in the world. In other words, you have to change yourself first. You have to focus on your own shortcomings before you can really make that change you want in the world. I think that's a very powerful sentiment and one worth reflecting on. But then finally from Mahatma Gandhi, he said this quote, which I think is something to do with that. Do you remember there was a famous chain of charter schools in America called KIPP, and their motto was, work hard, be nice. I think there's something very important about being nice, being kind, being considerate, not trampling over people as we build our careers and build our ideas. And so Mahatma Gandhi said, in a gentle way, you can shake the world. In a gentle way, you can shake the world. So be the change that you want to see. Be gentle, work hard, and be nice. But I congratulate you all on your achievements. I'm thrilled to be here with you. I'm looking forward to meeting every one of you in the marquee afterwards. But I now would like to hand back to the registrar as we continue this ceremony. Thank you very much.
Vice-Chancellor, I call upon Professor Barnaby Lennon, Dean of the Faculty of Education, to present candidates for degrees and diplomas of the University of Buckingham in Education.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you. I was a teacher for 40 years, and in a way I still am. I'm still in touch with my friends from school and university, and although some of them have made more money than me, I'm so pleased that when I left university, I decided to be a teacher, and I hope you have that feeling too. The joy of being able to stay close to a subject that you love. The discovery that I could continue throughout many years to develop my understanding of my subject while taking on new responsibilities as the years ticked by. I never ever found teaching boring. I often found it riveting. Not enough people can say that of their jobs. The fun of working alongside like-minded colleagues, the everyday drama of school life, the terrible things that some pupils do, the wonderful things some pupils do, the fact that few jobs have the capacity to make so much difference to the lives of people. The other day, I was invited for coffee with an army general who claimed that I had taught him in 1980. He meant little to me, I'm afraid, except for the fact that the coffee was a reminder to us teachers that in some small way that had some significance to him, I had said or done something that he still remembered and which had had some impact on his life. In 30 years' time, most of your pupils will remember you. Many will be grateful, especially for your pressing on during those dimly remembered days of that virus. Many will remember a good deal of what you taught them. Some will recall individual lessons and even specific things that you said in individual lessons. No one told me that that would happen when I was doing teacher training. For you are the key workers. We teachers, we may not be hugely wealthy, but we are so rich, so rich, and so clever for having chosen a profession which leads to a life brimming with interest and full of moral purpose. So, Vice-Chancellor, I present to you the Graduands in Education, starting with the degree for the Master of Education in Educational Leadership and Management, Nadia Ali. With distinction, Elizabeth Benson. Lindsay Fordyce. Michelle Quito. For the National Award for Special Educational Needs Coordination, Kirsty Ashby. Charlotte Dowen. For the award of Postgraduate Certificate in Education, with distinction, Hannah Abbott. Sana Baig. Tia Baker. Nina Basham. Jade Lee Balderson. Hannah Buckley. Juan Mahawad Capodonico. With distinction, Emma Collicott. Zoe Corner. With distinction, Jamie Elston. With distinction, Sarah England. With distinction, Begona Gamiro Perez. With distinction, Henna Ganatra. Maria Hernandez Garrido. With distinction, Natasha Hurd. Faiza Hussain. With distinction, Sarah Hussain. Ranji Josan. With distinction, Ambrin Kauser. Manuela Keach. With distinction, Faiza Katan. Dale Love. Aileen Mayer. Scarlett Mayer. Josie O'Connell. With distinction, Emily O'Donnell. With distinction, Jennifer Ohonian. Tara Patterson. Ross Peacock. With distinction, Paul Spear. With distinction, Louise Stuckey. Paris Timms. Sheena Wallier. With distinction, Vanessa Watt. Crystal Vincent. For the award of postgraduate certificate in education with qualified teacher status, with distinction, Lee Elise Adkins. With distinction, Kerry Baptiste. With distinction, Lucy Barnes. With distinction, Harvey Dixon. Betsy Free. Paige Gallagher. Carly Gibb. Tobias Hartley. With distinction, Ben Hawley. With distinction, Georgia Hurd. With distinction, Elizabeth Horridge. With distinction, Benjamin Hurst. Zoe King. With distinction, Sarah Langham. With distinction, Catherine Latter. Aisha Manzoor. With distinction, Elizabeth Santa Clara Miller. Zara Mughal. With distinction, Ashley Murray. With distinction, Andrew North. With distinction, Emily Pridham. With distinction, Poppy Riley. Jasmeet Sidhu. With distinction, Grace Helen Victoria Spark. With distinction, Mitchell Stevens. With distinction, Anne Thomas. With distinction, Laura True. Thomas Wallace. With distinction, Karen Wetton. With distinction, Amy Winter. For the award of Professional Graduate Certificate in Education, Ka Chung. Joseph Benjamin Cumberbatch. Christina Foster. Vice-Chancellor, that concludes the presentation.
Vice-Chancellor, I call upon you to confer degrees and diplomas upon candidates whose names have been published in the programme but who are unable to be present here today.
Registrar, by the authority of the University, I admit candidates in absentia to the degrees and diplomas for which they have qualified.
The Vice-Chancellor will now conclude this ceremony.
It has been wonderful meeting many of you already. I'm looking forward to retiring to the marquee on the Balloff lawn, where I hope to meet more of you, graduates of the University of Buckingham, and your families and friends. I can't repeat enough how wonderful it is to have people back on campus and to be able to share in this fellowship with you. And as I say, it's been particularly gratifying for me to know that so many of you are going off to work in education in whatever ways to change lives, whether that's changing the life of just one person who remembers you as a teacher, or changing the lives of many, or even changing a system, depending on where you go and what you are going to do. But I know that you're going to do wonderful things in your lives. So, and you now can wear, I hope, the badge of the University of Buckingham with pride and honour as you embark on the next stages of your journey through life. Someone once remarked, there are two lasting bequests we can give our children. One is roots, the other is wings. And I think that applies to students and pupils, students and graduates as well. We can give our students roots and wings. Many of you may have heard that word wings and be reminded of the University of Buckingham's own motto, which is Alice Volans Proprius, translated from the Latin, flying on our own wings. And what I hope is that that we have given you in your time at Buckingham, your time learning through the faculty at Buckingham, we have given you or equipped you with wings, your degrees, your postgraduate qualifications, your experiences that will help you fly at whatever awaits you next in life. You'll be flying, and we can take pride in having assisted you in that journey. But we also want to be a very strong part of your roots. I do want you to see yourselves as part of this growing international family of alumni of the University of Buckingham, and having roots here in Buckingham. I mentioned earlier, I was very pleased that I moved. Did I mention earlier that we moved the campus from Whittlebury Hall, where you were, the education faculty was based? We've moved them down here to Buckingham. So future education graduates can become much more immersed in where we are here. It was always very disconcerting when I went to Whittlebury Hall to meet Professor Lennon and his colleagues, and you'd wander down the corridors to his office, and frequently you would encounter 2 or 3 people coming towards you wearing nothing but a bathrobe or a towel around their waist, because it was a spa as well as a hotel and conference centre. You don't get that in the Vincent Building, Professor Lennon. There's a much more sedate form of sartorial preferences there. But I do want you to feel that you're part of the roots of the University of Buckingham. I want you to feel that you're able to fly wherever you go. And actually, 1 or 2 people as they came to the platform said to me, I want to hear more about that work in India or Nigeria. And maybe some of you will fly in that way. Maybe some of you will fly in a different way. But I'm confident that with the background you've had here at the University of Buckingham, with the support from your friends and families, that you will fly in many different ways. And I think the future looks rosy and brilliant for you. So I want to close this ceremony. There's a form of words I have to use. But before I conclude, I want to say to you, keep in touch, please. You're a very important part of our lives, any alumni, but you understand from what you've heard from me today that the education graduates are particularly special. Don't tell the other graduates, by the way. But you are particularly special to me. We had the medical graduation here very recently, and they have this wonderful thing, the medics, where they recite a modified form of the Hippocratic Oath. And they're very important. They're going in the world, and it starts with that, first do no harm. I often wish as educators, and maybe we'll talk about this, Professor Lennon, but as educators, maybe we should have some sort of recitation of our commitment to the incredibly valuable work we do as educators, the work that no one else can do, and the work that we do so brilliantly. But for now, we don't have such an oath, so I will say, keep in touch. I mean that sincerely. And with that in mind, I will now say the words, this ceremony is now concluded.